Chance encounters. Olivia Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her brow as she finished her 12-hour shift. Being a paramedic in Portland meant constant movement, high stakes, and little appreciation. Today had been particularly grueling: 3 cardiac arrests, a major car accident, and a toddler with a febrile seizure. Her shoulders ached from carrying equipment, and her mind raced with the faces of those she'd helped save. "You should come tonight," her roommate Penny insisted as they crossed paths in the apartment they shared. "Just a small gathering at Jasper's. Calf, you need human interaction that doesn't involve someone's medical emergency." Olivia wanted to refuse, to sink into her bed and disappear. But Penny had been trying to get her out for weeks. "Fine," she conceded. "But I'm leaving early. If it's boring." Jasper's Calf sat nestled between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. Its warm amber lights glowing invitingly against the evening drizzle. Olivia arrived in jeans and a comfortable sweater, her curly hair still damp from a quick shower. "You made it," Penny exclaimed, introducing her to several friends before abandoning her for her boyfriend. Olivia found herself alone at the counter, nursing a cup of tea, when someone bumped into her, causing the hot liquid to splash onto her sleeve. So sorry," a deep voice apologized. The man grabbed napkins, handing them to her with genuine concern in his hazel eyes. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with small scars and calluses. "Please, let me buy you another." "It's fine," Olivia insisted, but he had already signaled the barista. "I'm Thomas," he offered. "Thomas Reed. Olivia Rodriguez." "Paramedic, right?" he asked, nodding toward the small emergency services pin on her bag. She nodded, surprised. "Most people don't notice that." "I notice details," he said with a gentle smile. "Comes with the job. I'm a carpenter." Conversation flowed easily between them. Thomas listened intently as she described her day, asking thoughtful questions about her work. He told her about his latest project, restoring an old sailboat, and with the quiet passion of someone who truly loved what they did. "How did you get into carpentry?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face briefly. "My grandfather taught me. Said everyone should know how to build something with their hands, no matter what else they did in life." When the cafe began to close, Thomas offered her a ride home in what turned out to be a weathered pickup truck with mismatched doors. "It's not much," he said, patting the dashboard affectionately, "but it's reliable." Over the next few weeks, Thomas became a steady presence in Olivia's life. He would appear with coffee after her shifts, or invite her to explore hidden corners of the city. They hiked forest trails, visited farmers markets, and spent hours in used bookstores. Never fancy restaurants or exclusive clubs, always simple. Authentic experiences. What Olivia didn't know was that Thomas Reed was born Thomas Reed Wellington. 3. Sole heir to Wellington Technologies, a multinational corporation valued at $74 billion. The man who drove her home in a rusted pickup had his own private jet. The hands that carved delicate wooden figurines for her also signed corporate acquisitions worth millions. After a childhood of privilege and isolation, Thomas had rebelled against his predetermined path. He'd negotiated a deal with his father. Would eventually take over the company, but first, he would live on his own terms for 2 years, experiencing life outside the bubble of wealth. His carpentry wasn't just a hobby. It was his declaration of independence. With Olivia, Thomas found something he'd never experienced before: someone who saw him, not his potential worth. In her one-bedroom apartment, eating takeout and laughing about her disaster stories from work, he felt more at home than in any of his family's mansions. As autumn leaves began to fall, Thomas realized he was falling too for a woman who had no idea who he really was. Authentic connections, the autumn chill settled over Portland as Thomas and Olivia's relationship deepened. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, meeting whenever Olivia's unpredictable paramedic schedule allowed. Thomas always seemed available, explaining that he worked freelance projects with flexible hours. One evening, they sat on the rickety fire escape outside Olivia's apartment, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I've never met anyone like you," Olivia admitted, her fingers intertwined with his. Most men I date eventually get tired of my crazy hours or the fact that I sometimes smell like hospital disinfectant. Thomas laughed, bringing her hand to his lips. I love that you save lives for a living. It's real work, important work. What he didn't say was how refreshing her authenticity was compared to the calculated social climbers who had pursued him. Throughout his life, women who researched his net worth before their first date, who casually mentioned their entrepreneurial aspirations hoping for investment, who examined his watch and shoes to estimate his wealth. Tell me about your family, Olivia prompted, noticing how rarely he mentioned them. Thomas tensed slightly. Not much to tell. My mother passed when I was young. My father is dedicated to his work. We don't always see eye to eye. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. His father, Richard Wellington, was a business titan known for his ruthless acquisition strategies and technological innovations. Their disagreements weren't simple family squabbles, but boardroom battles covered by financial news outlets. My family is the opposite, Olivia shared. My parents call daily. My 4 siblings text constantly, and Sunday dinners are mandatory when I'm not on shift. They're loud, opinionated, and completely in each other's business. Sounds wonderful, Thomas said wistfully. The following weekend, Olivia invited Thomas to one of those family dinners. He arrived with homemade bread and a wooden serving board he'd crafted himself. Immediately winning over her mother, Alina. You made this? Alina marveled, running her fingers over the smooth cherry wood. Just a hobby, Thomas said modestly. Olivia's father, Jorge, a construction foreman, engaged Thomas in conversation about different wood types and building techniques. Her siblings teased her mercilessly about finding someone so handsome and talented. Throughout the evening, Thomas felt a growing knot in his stomach. The Rodriguez family welcomed him without question, shared their stories, their home, their food. Meanwhile, he was living a half-truth, withholding an essential part of himself. Later that night, as they walked through a nearby park, Olivia noticed his distraction. Everything okay? My family can be overwhelming? They're wonderful, Thomas assured her. I just... double quotes. He hesitated. Right. I've been thinking about introducing you to my father. The words surprised even him. In his 2 years of normal living, he'd kept his Wellington identity completely separate from his everyday life as Thomas Reed. I'd like that, Olivia smiled, unaware of the significance of what he was suggesting. The moment passed, but the idea lingered. Thomas found himself at a crossroads. His agreement with his father would end in 3 months. Soon he would need to step into his role as the future CEO of Wellington Technologies. How could he bring Olivia into that world without losing what made their relationship special? Meanwhile, their connection continued to strengthen.
Thomas
Helped Olivia through the emotional aftermath of losing a young patient, holding her as she cried and reassuring her that she'd done everything possible. Olivia supported Thomas when a restoration project went wrong, staying up late to help him rebuild a client's antique table. On Olivia's birthday, Thomas suggested a camping trip to the coast. They hiked to a secluded beach where he surprised her with a picnic and a small wooden box he'd carved, featuring intricate patterns of waves and seabirds. Open it, he encouraged. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small compass charm. It's beautiful, she whispered as he fastened it around her wrist. The compass is to remind you that no matter where life takes us, I'll always find my way back to you. As they sat by the campfire that night, Thomas came closer than ever to revealing his secret. The words formed in his mind, I need to tell you something important, but fear held them back. Fear that everything would change once she knew then. Truth. What Thomas didn't realize was that his 2 worlds were already colliding. Back in Portland, a business magazine had just published its annual 30 Under 30 list, featuring Thomas Reed Wellington III and his innovative approach to sustainable technology development. The article included a recent photo from a charity gala he'd attended during a brief visit to New York. Heir. Public appearance during his 2-year agreement, the magazine sat in the waiting room of the hospital where Olivia worked. Its cover, announcing the next generation of business leaders, with Thomas's photograph prominently displayed. Unraveling threads, the first hint came from an unexpected source. Olivia was restocking the ambulance when her colleague Jackson approached with an odd expression. "Your boyfriend's a carpenter, right?" he asked casually. "Yes," Olivia replied, organizing gauze packets. "Why? Weird coincidence. He looks exactly like this tech billionaire's son I just read about." Olivia laughed. "Thomas? A billionaire? Drives a truck that's held together with duct tape and hope?" Jackson shrugged and walked away, but the comment lingered in Olivia's mind. That evening, as she waited for Thomas to pick her up for dinner, she impulsively searched Wellington Technologies' Heir on her phone. The screen filled with images of Thomas in tailored suits at corporate events and charity galas. Same hazel eyes, same gentle smile, but in a context so removed from the man she knew that Olivia initially convinced herself it was just someone who looked similar. Then she found an interview where Thomas Reed Wellington III discussed his passion for traditional woodworking as a counterbalance to the digital world. The pieces started to fit together: his detailed knowledge of business practices he claimed to have read about, his mysterious trips to visit family, the calloused hands that seemed at odds with his extensive knowledge of international politics. In economics, when Thomas's truck pulled up outside, Olivia slipped her phone into her pocket, heart racing. Should she confront him? Was there a reasonable explanation? "You're quiet tonight," Thomas observed as they walked through the Saturday market, sampling local foods. "Just tired," she lied, studying his face for any sign of deception. Later that week, Olivia was transferring a patient to a private medical facility when she noticed a plaque in the lobby: Wellington Medical Wing, dedicated to the advancement of emergency medicine. Beneath it, a photograph showed Richard Wellington shaking hands with the hospital director. Beside him stood Thomas, looking uncomfortable in a suit, but unmistakably the same man who had made breakfast in her kitchen that morning. The final confirmation came unexpectedly. Olivia had picked up an extra shift and was responding to an emergency at a downtown hotel. A business conference attendee had suffered a severe allergic reaction. As her team stabilized the patient in the grand ballroom, Olivia glanced up to see Thomas's father on the stage, mid-presentation. A slide behind him showed the Wellington Technologies executive team, with a photo of Thomas labeled Thomas R. Wellington III, Chief Innovation Officer on sabbatical. The shock must have shown on her face because her partner asked if she needed to step outside. Olivia completed her work professionally, but her mind was in turmoil. The man she thought she knew, the simple carpenter with the rusty truck and modest apartment, was living a double life. That night, Olivia waited in her apartment, rehearsing what she would say. When Thomas arrived with takeout and his usual warm smile, the practiced words abandoned her. "Is your name really Thomas Reed Wellington III?" she blurted out. The container of food slipped from his hands, landing with a splat on the floor. The look on his face, shock, guilt, and fear, was all the confirmation she needed. Truth and consequences, the silence between them stretched like an abyss. Thomas stood frozen, takeout food spreading across the floor, his carefully constructed world crumbling with it. "Olivia, I can explain," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please do," she replied coldly, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Explain why you've been lying to me for months." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she'd always found endearing. Now, it just seemed like another performance. "My name is Thomas Reed Wellington III, he confirmed. "My family owns Wellington Technologies, but everything else, how I feel about you, who I am when I'm with youth, that's all real." Olivia paced the small apartment, processing his words. So the carpentry, the pickup truck, the struggling to pay bills, was that all some elaborate game? "No, carpentry is genuine, it's what I love doing. But yes, I have resources I haven't disclosed." Thomas moved toward her, but stopped when she flinched away. "My father and I made an agreement. For taking my position in the company, I wanted 2 years to live on my own terms, away from the expectations and privileges. And I was just part of your little experiment in how the other half lives?" Her voice cracked with hurt. "God, no, Olivia. Meeting you wasn't planned. What happened between us is the most authentic thing I've ever experienced." Olivia sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. I don't even know who you are anymore. Thomas knelt before her, not touching her, but close enough that she could see the anguish in his eyes. I'm still the same person who holds you when you cry after losing a patient. Who knows you take your coffee with one sugar and always save the crusts of your sandwich for last. Who falls more in love with you every day? It was the first time either of them had used the word love, and it hung in the air between them. Why didn't you tell me? Olivia asked, the anger in her voice giving way to confusion. Thomas exhaled slowly. At first, it wasn't relevant. We're just two people getting to know each other. Then, as things got serious, I was afraid. Everyone who's ever known about my family's wealth has treated me differently. I didn't want to lose the way you looked at me, like I was just Thomas, not a Wellington. So you thought lying was better? I thought waiting for the right time was better, he corrected gently. In 3 months, my agreement with my father ends. I was planning to tell you everything then, to ask if you'd be willing to try navigating that world with me. Olivia stood abruptly. I need some time. It's too much. Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need, but please know, nothing about us was fake. As he left her apartment, Olivia felt as though she was watching a stranger, or perhaps seeing the real Thomas Wellington for the first time. The following days passed in a blur. Olivia threw herself into work, taking extra shifts to avoid the emptiness of her apartment. Friends noticed her distraction, but she deflected their concerns. Meanwhile, Thomas respected her request for space, though he sent a single message. When you're ready to talk, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. One evening, Olivia found herself driving past Thomas's workshop. Lights glowed from within, and on impulse, she parked and peered through the window. Thomas was bent over his workbench, sanding a piece of wood with the same care and focus she'd always admired. His expression was one of complete absorption, passion evident in every movement. It was then that the truth hit her, wealth or not. The question was whether that love could survive the breach of trust. Redefined foundations. A week of silence stretched into 2. Autumn faded into early winter, and Portland draped itself in holiday lights and a dusting of snow. Olivia moved through her days mechanically, saving lives and returning to an apartment that felt emptier than it ever had. On a particularly cold morning, she responded to an emergency at a homeless shelter downtown. A woman had gone into premature labor, and Olivia's team arrived to find her in distress, the baby coming fast. Amid the controlled chaos of the delivery, Olivia noticed the shelter's recently renovated facility's new beds, improved heating systems, a fully stocked medical cabinet that made their job significantly easier. This place has changed, she commented to the shelter director as they prepared to transport the mother and her healthy newborn to the hospital. Anonymous donor, the director explained. He's been funding improvements for about 1.5 years now. Comes by sometimes to do repairs himself. Quiet guy, drives an old pickup. Olivia's heart stuttered. Later, she discreetly checked the shelter's donor plaque. While no name was listed, the dedication read, "In memory of Elizabeth Reed Wellington, who taught me that privilege demands responsibility." That evening, Olivia found herself outside Thomas's modest apartment building. Her knock was answered almost immediately, suggesting he'd been close to the door, or perhaps hoping she would come. Thomas looked tired, his usual neat appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and shadowed eyes. The apartment behind him was cluttered with woodworking projects, as if he'd been pouring his emotions into his craft. "May I come in?" she asked softly. They sat across from each other at his small kitchen table, mugs of tea warming their hands. Against the winter chill, "I've been thinking about trust," Olivia began, "about how it's built and broken and rebuilt." Thomas remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. "You hid an important part of yourself from me, and that hurt. But I've realized something. I know the essential truth of who you are. I've seen it in how you treat people, how you work with your hands, how you listen when I talk about my day." She reached across the table, not quite touching him yet. "Visited the riverfront shelter today." The director mentioned their anonymous benefactor. Thomas looked down, a flush spreading across his cheeks. My mother died when I was 10. She always taught me that wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. The shelters were her passion. Why keep that hidden too? She believed true charity doesn't seek recognition, he explained. And it felt like the one pure thing I could do with my family's resources. Olivia nodded, understanding blooming. I still have questions, still need honesty moving forward. But I'm willing to try, to see what this looks like with everything in the open. Relief washed over Thomas's features. I'll answer anything you ask. No more secrets. For the next hours, then days, then weeks, they rebuilt their relationship. On new foundations, Thomas showed Olivia both sides of his world, the corporate responsibilities he was preparing to assume, and the simple joys of carpentry that kept him grounded. He introduced her to his father, an intimidating man who nonetheless showed flashes of the same dry humor Thomas possessed. Olivia shared her anxieties about entering a world so different from her own, her fears of not belonging among the social elite that Thomas had been born into. I don't belong there either, Thomas confessed. That's why I needed these 2 years to figure out how to bring these parts of myself together. One evening in early spring, Thomas took Olivia to a secluded overlook of the city. The spot was accessible only by a hiking trail, and they arrived just as sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors. I've been thinking, Thomas said, his voice thoughtful, about what happens when my agreement with my father ends next month. Olivia tensed slightly, still occasionally anxious about the changes ahead. I'll take my position at Wellington Technologies, he continued, but on my terms. I've proposed a new division focused on sustainable construction and affordable housing initiatives. My father has agreed. He reached for her hand. I'll still be Thomas the carpenter. That won't change. And I'd like to keep the pickup truck if you don't mind, Olivia laughed, the tension breaking. I've grown rather fond of that death trap on wheels. Thomas's expression grew serious. What I'm trying to say is, I don't want to choose between worlds anymore. I want to build something new, something that honors both parts of who I am, and I want to build it with you. From his pocket, he produced not a velvet jewelry box as Olivia half expected, but a small wooden one, similar to the gift he'd given her months ago. Inside, however, was indeed a simple band of silver inlaid with a thin strip of polished wood. I made this, he said, voice rough with emotion. From the first project we worked on together. Olivia remembered a bookshelf for her apartment, the first time she'd seen the passion and skill in his craftsmanship. Olivia Rodriguez, you loved me when I was just Thomas Reed. Would you consider loving Thomas Wellington too? Would you marry me and help build this bridge between my worlds? Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she took the ring, admiring its elegant simplicity and the thought behind it. I fell in love with you, not your name or your bank account, she said firmly. That hasn't changed. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Olivia added with a teasing smile, but I'm keeping my rusty stethoscope, if you don't mind. Some things should stay exactly as they are.